Chapter 1. The invisible giant. You won't believe what happened to every single army that ever tried to wipe this one specific nation off the face of the earth. For thousands of years, the world's most terrifying empires made the exact same fatal mistake. They marched onto the Iranian plateau with their swords drawn, absolutely certain they were about to erase this civilization forever. Think about the sheer scale of the forces that tried. The legendary Macedonian phalanxes of Alexander the Great smashed through here. Ruthless Roman legions marched across these lands. Arab armies swept in under the banners of a whole new religion. And the ferocious Mongol hordes of Genghis Khan tore through the cities, leaving behind literally nothing but towering pyramids of human skulls. Now, under that much pressure, any other nation on Earth would have vanished permanently. They would have dissolved into the genetic and cultural melting pot of history, completely forgotten, just like it happened to the Babylonians, the Hittites, or the mighty Assyrians. But with Iran, something entirely inexplicable took place, time and time again. Despite losing the actual battles, despite losing their capital cities, and despite enduring brutal foreign occupation, the Iranians did something no one else in human history could do. They digested their conquerors. Just a few decades would pass after an invasion, and the brutal invaders would suddenly start speaking the Persian language. They would start building Persian architecture, adopting the traditional state bureaucracy, and even wearing Persian clothes. Again and again, the East essentially absorbed the West and the nomads alike. How on earth has Iran managed, from deep antiquity right up to the present day, to force every major world power to reckon with it? How did they preserve their core identity through that much bloodshed? And how did it happen that Great Persia, a country with a 5,000-year history, voluntarily abandoned its legendary name, forcing the entire world to call it Iran? This is the incredible story of how a single nation invented the very concept of time we live in today, turned global geopolitics into a holy war between light and darkness, and learned how to lose battles in order to ultimately win eternity. Chapter 2. The Cradle. Choked by dust. To truly understand the depth of this civilization, we need to rewind the clock incredibly far back. Traditionally, the Western world considers Mesopotamia, meaning places like Sumer and Babylon or ancient Egypt, to be the true cradle of civilization. In this standard worldview, Iran is often completely sidelined, and honestly, that is a massive historical injustice. Human evolution took its natural, powerful course right here, on the plateau 50,000 years ago. Neanderthals dominated these lands, only to be replaced by Cro-Magnons around 36,000 years ago. But the real revolution kicked off much later. Intrepid archaeologists have discovered massive urban-type settlements deep on Iranian territory, like the mysterious Giroft culture and the ancient Siaks, which date back a staggering 6,000 to 7,000 years. Beautifully crafted ceramic vessels from the 4th millennium before Christ irrefutably prove one of the oldest civilizations on the entire planet evolved right here, standing shoulder to shoulder with Mesopotamia and China. The first major geopolitical player to rise in these lands was Elam, a powerful state in the southwest of modern day Iran, with its capital in the legendary city of Susa. The Elamites were so incredibly formidable that by the 26th century before Christ, they were practically dictating their own will to the famous Sumerians. But the most mind-blowing event happened in the 23rd century before Christ, when the Akkad king Naram-Sin went to war with Elam. The conflict didn't end with a simple truce or a hasty retreat. A formal, written treaty was signed between the two powers. It guaranteed Elam's independence on the condition that they aligned their foreign policy with Akkad. Think about that for a moment. This is the single first documented international treaty in human history. The Iranian space stood at the very origins of global diplomacy, before most of the world even knew what a state was. Genetically, however, the Elamites were closer to the people of Mesopotamia. The people we actually call Iranians today arrived on the scene a bit later, sometime between the 20th and 15th centuries before Christ. Massive nomadic tribes began descending onto this mountainous plateau from the bitter north, moving down from the steppes of Central Asia and the Caucasus. They belonged to the giant family of Indo-European nations, specifically representing its distinct Indo-Iranian branch. Amazingly, their ancient language was a direct relative of Latin, Greek, and the languages spoken across all of Europe today, including English and Spanish. Settling down on these rugged lands, they began calling themselves Aryans, which originally meant noble, and they proudly named their new homeland Aryanum, Veja, meaning the land of the Aryans. Over the course of centuries, this word morphed into the familiar name we know today as Iran. They mixed seamlessly with the ancient culture of Elam and eventually split into powerful rival alliances, the most famous of which became the Medes and the Persians. Chapter 3. The birth of light and linear time. It was right here, in these incredibly harsh mountains and unforgiving deserts, that the primary weapon of the Iranians was born. And no, it wasn't the chariot, nor was it a special kind of composite bow. It was pure ideology. Long before the emergence of Christianity and long before Islam, a religion was born on the Iranian plateau that completely turned human consciousness upside down. It was called Zoroastrianism. For the ancient Iranian, life was never simply a random series of meaningless accidents or a predictable, cyclical changing of the seasons. The entire universe was perceived as a massive battlefield of a total, uncompromising cosmic war. On one side stood Ahura Mazda, the transcendent god of light, truth, and ultimate order. On the other side was Ahriman, the spirit of absolute evil, lies, and suffocating darkness. Most importantly, Zoroastrianism clearly mapped the geography of this evil. The realm of darkness was considered to be the wild, nomadic expanse of Eurasia to the north, known as Turan, from which devastating, bloody raids were constantly launched against the settlements. To be Iranian meant, by definition, to be a warrior of light. Their entire culture, their breathtaking poetry, and their very statehood were built on the singular idea of actively assisting the cosmic forces of good. This profound concept gave the nation a phenomenal, unbreakable unity. But Zoroastrianism did something even more massive for the human race. This spiritual tradition was the absolute first in history to declare that time does not move in a never-ending circle. Instead, they argued that time is completely linear. The world had a definitive beginning, creation, and it will have an inevitable, dramatic end. There will be a final, cataclysmic battle between light and dark, a purification of the entire world by fire, a last judgment, and the ultimate triumph of good. How did this groundbreaking idea manage to conquer the world? Well, when the Persians conquered Babylon in the 6th century before Christ, they famously liberated the Jewish people who were languishing there in agonizing captivity. Judea then became a peaceful province of the Persian Empire for 2 full centuries. during this long period of incredibly close contact. Jewish thinkers adopted from the Zoroastrians the distinct culture of anticipating the end of times, the framework of linear time, and the concept of a final judgment. Later on, this exact doctrine flowed directly into Christianity and Islam. Prominent philosophers, including the brilliant Friedrich Nietzsche, openly acknowledged that Iran played the key role in discovering linear time, the very coordinates within which the entire modern world still thinks today. Chapter 4. The superpower and the sack of blood. The first truly great state formed by these Aryans was Media, established around 670 before Christ. The Medes did not last particularly long in the grand scheme of things, but they did manage to completely destroy the formidable and terrifying Assyrian Empire. However, their regional hegemony was cut short by their own close relatives, the Persians. In the year 550 before Christ, a visionary man named Cyrus the Great, who was half Persian and half Mede, united his two peoples, combining the tribes into a single force. Out of this historic union, he began building what modern historians call the Achaemenid Empire, the absolute first true superpower in human history. Cyrus was cut from a completely different cloth than the brutal tyrants of the past. When he was busy conquering Lydia, the wealthy Greek city-states of Asia Minor, or the massive metropolis of Babylon, he didn't destroy their sacred temples, nor did he enslave their local populations. He deliberately built an entire empire on a foundation of mutual respect. His brilliant successor, Darius I, expanded these borders even further, stretching the empire all the way from Egypt to the fertile Indus Valley. Nearly 50 million people, which was literally half the entire population of the earth at that time, lived peacefully under Persian rule. To manage this behemoth, Darius divided the country into 20 efficient administrative districts called satrapies. He introduced a highly organized, unified tax system, minted pristine gold coins known as and laid down an epic network of royal roads along which the fastest state postal service in the world constantly raced. But history is notoriously unforgiving to any sign of weakness. In a desperate attempt to secure the empire's borders from what they viewed as the nomadic darkness, Cyrus the Great ventured deep into Central Asia to wage a brutal war against the fierce Massagetha tribe. And it was there that the greatest emperor the world had ever seen met his tragic end. The ensuing battle was so incredibly savage that the Persian army was completely annihilated. According to the ancient historian Herodotus, the fierce leader of the Massagetae, Queen Tamir, seeking absolute revenge for the tragic death of her son, ordered her men to scour the battlefield and find the body of Cyrus. Once they found him, she cut off his head and threw it into a heavy leather sack filled to the brim with human blood. She looked at it and declared, "You thirsted for blood throughout your whole life. Now, drink your fill." Chapter 5. The myth of the West and the Macedonian storm. Despite that horrific tragedy out on the steppes, the empire lived on. In modern Western culture, we are completely used to thinking that the famous Greco-Persian War Z, once featuring the legendary 300 Spartans, totally crushed the Persian state. But honestly, that is a pure Western myth. Yes, the independent Greeks successfully defended their homeland. But for the giant, wealthy Achaemenid Empire, losing a couple of minor battles on the fringe cities of the Mediterranean was like a minor mosquito bite. The Persians simply changed their tactics. Instead of sending massive armies, they began heavily funding first Athens and then Sparta, cleverly pitting the rival Greeks against each other in endless, draining civil wars. Ultimately, in the year 387 before Christ, the completely exhausted Greeks were forced to sign a humiliating peace treaty entirely on the strict terms of the Persian king. What the Persians could not take with a massive army, they simply bought with gold. Persia became the undisputed master of Greece without firing a single shot. The real catastrophe, however, arrived a bit later. The Achaemenid Empire eventually grew to such massive, bloated proportions that a weakening central government in Persepolis could no longer effectively control dozens of completely different nations. A young, fiercely ambitious king from the Kingdom of Macedonia took absolute advantage of this internal rot. Alexander. In the year 330 before Christ, the highly organized Macedonian phalanxes ruthlessly crushed the main Persian army in a series of brutal encounters. Alexander marched into the heart of the empire and burned the magnificent, unparalleled palace city of Persepolis to the ground. At that moment, it genuinely seemed like the thousand-year history of Iran was completely finished. From the smoking ruins of the Achaemenids arose the Hellenistic Seleucid state, ruled entirely by Greek elites. But that is exactly when the ancient Iranian survival mechanism kicked in. The deep, patient Eastern culture began to methodically devour its Western conquerors from the inside out. Alexander himself, captivated by the grandeur, started wearing traditional Persian clothes and eagerly adopted the complex Persian court etiquette. The heavy-handed policy of forced Hellenization completely choked on the thick, ancient bedrock of the Iranian worldview. By the 3rd century before Christ, the Parth, a fierce Indo-Iranian tribe from the north, successfully kicked the Greeks out of the plateau entirely and created the powerful Parthian Empire. The Parthian ruler, Mithridates the first, proudly proclaimed himself the King of Kings and the rightful successor to the ancient for 5 long centuries. The Parthians, relying on their highly mobile horse archers and the famous devastating Parthian shot, successfully stood their ground against the mighty Roman Empire itself, dealing crushing, humiliating defeats to the Roman legions in the deserts of the Middle East. Chapter 6. The Bleeding Giant and the Desert Winden. In the year 224, a brand new golden age arrived for the plateau. The Sassanid dynasty successfully seized power, hailing directly from the Pars region, exact cultural homeland of the very first Persians. They created a fiercely centralized, powerful state where Zoroastrianism was elevated to the official state doctrine. The entire society was divided into strict, organized castes. The powerful priests, the elite warriors, the efficient bureaucrats, and the commoners, establishing what was, for its time, an ideal meritocracy. Sassanid Iran was a global superpower that waged grueling, relentless wars for almost 400 straight years. First, they fought with Rome, and then they fought with Byzantium, locking horns in an endless struggle for ultimate control over fertile Mesopotamia and the rugged Caucasus. But these long centuries of endless, high-stakes warfare eventually bled Iran completely dry by the middle of the 7th century. The Sassanid Empire was nothing more than a bleeding, exhausted giant, a brand new, completely unprecedented force emerging from the scorching deserts of the Arabian Peninsula capitalized on this profound exhaustion. The Arab Caliphate. In the year 651, the grand Persian capital fell to the invaders. And the very last Shah of the Sassanid dynasty was treacherously murdered while on the run just like that. All of Iran fell completely under Arab rule, and the strict era of the Umayyad Caliphate began. The invading Arabs brought a vibrant new religion, Islam, and a powerful new language, Arabic, Zoroastrianism, which had fueled the unique Iranian spirit and identity for millennia, began to rapidly fade into the background. For any other culture on earth, this would have marked the total, permanent erasure of their identity. We watched it happen to ancient Egypt and to Syria, both of which became permanently Arabized over time. But the Persians did it again. Various Arab rulers tried their absolute best to force the Persians to abandon their linguistic and cultural roots completely. Yet, having suffered an undeniable military defeat on the battlefield, the Iranians struck back culturally. The Islamic Caliphate, especially when the Abbasid dynasty took over, began to rely incredibly heavily on talented Persian bureaucrats, brilliant scholars, and master poets to actually run their empire. The sophisticated Arab caliphs eagerly adopted ancient Persian methods of governance. The beautiful Farsi language did not just survive. It completely outlived dozens of Islamic empires. And the greatest scientific treatises, medical journals, and breathtaking poems of the Islamic Golden Age continued to be written in the Persian tongue. Asterisk Chapter 7. The Apocalypse and the Blue Domes After. The Arabs, a true, unmitigated apocalypse, crashed down upon the Iranian plateau. In the year 1220, the unstoppable Genghis Khan arrived like a nightmare from the vast steppes of Central Asia. The Mongols did not just conquer territories for political gain, they systematically slaughtered entire cities and completely wiped thousand-year-old underground irrigation systems off the face of the earth, turning fertile valleys into deserts. It genuinely seemed like Iran would be permanently turned into nothing more than a barren pasture for nomadic animals. But when the grandson of Genghis Khan, a ruler named Hulagu, settled down and founded a distinct Mongol state here, called the Il, something absolutely incredible happened. The Hordes, terrifying conquerors, who were used to living in simple feltier, suddenly embraced Islam. They officially made the Persian language the language of their state bureaucracy. They began funding local scholars and poets, and they started building grand, breathtaking Persian mosques, decorated with those iconic deep blue domes that define the skyline today. At the end of the 14th century, history repeated itself in the most brutal way imaginable. The conqueror Tamerlane stormed into these lands with absolute fury. He famously erected massive pyramids out of the severed human heads of the local population. Yet, at the exact same time, he stood in absolute, humbled awe of Persian culture. He forcibly took the very best Iranian artisans, architects, and painters back to his capital city of Sam. His direct descendants, the Timurids, ended up sparking a true Persian cultural renaissance, turning their royal courts into legendary centers of exquisite miniature paintings and sublime poetry. For almost 300 years, Iran was a chaotic, boiling cauldron where actual political and military power belonged almost entirely to fearsome Mongol and Turkish warlords. But the pattern never failed. Upon taking the historic Iranian throne, within just a couple of short generations, these terrifying warlords irrevocably became patrons of Persian culture. The ancient Iranian cultural code completely reprogrammed its own invaders. Chapter 8. The Great Game and the Return of the Name Out of this turbulent 300-year cauldron of shifting tribes and competing dynasties. A charismatic leader named Shah Ismail emerged in the year 1501. He successfully reunited the fractured country and founded the powerful Safavid state. It was the Safavids who made a massive, permanent geopolitical move. They established Shia Islam as the official state religion of Iran. This crucial decision forever separated the country culturally and politically from the rest of the predominantly Sunni Islamic world, especially their bitter rivals, the Ottoman Empire. Iran had, once again, forged a rigid, unique identity to protect itself from absorption. By the 19th century, under the rule of the Turkic Qajar dynasty, Iran unfortunately entered a period of severe, agonizing stagnation and crises, following a series of devastating, one-sided wars with the expanding Russian Empire. The country permanently lost its historic territories in the Caucasus, including modern-day Georgia, Armenia, and Azerbaijan, by the early years of the 20th century. On the absolute eve of the First World War, Iran had unfortunately become nothing more than a helpless backdrop for the Great Game. The intense geopolitical standoff between the British and Russian empires. The country was effectively carved up into foreign spheres of influence without its consent. The British were busy pumping massive amounts of Iranian oil in the south, while Russian imperial troops stood heavily in the north. Later on, the Soviet Union even tried to set up a breakaway communist republic in northern Iran. The ancient country was suffocating under the immense weight of colonial powers. But Iran would not be Iran if it didn't find a dramatic way out of a corner. In the year 1925, a military man named Reza Shah Pahlavi came to power as the direct result of a coup. He immediately charted a hardline, uncompromising course toward rapid industrialization and modernization. And in the year 1935, he made a bold move that completely shook global diplomacy. For many centuries, the entire Western world had referred to this country as Persia. This specific word, derived from the ancient Greek name for the southern Pars region, was heavily associated in Europe with romantic fairy tales, exotic carpets, backwardness, and colonial Orientalism. Reza Shah declared an absolute end to that perception. He sent a formal, official directive to every single foreign embassy across the globe. From that day forward, the country must be called exclusively by its true, ancient name, the very name its people had called themselves for thousands of years: Iran, the land of the Aryans. This was never just a petty linguistic whim. It was a massive, powerful statement to the global community. It said, "We are not some exotic, backward colony for you to exploit. We are a modern, powerful nation with deeply ancient roots, and you will absolute reckon with us." Chapter 9. The Two Faces of Eternity. The history of Iran is and has always been a history of incredibly radical pivots. In the mid-20th century, the country found itself trapped once again on the global chessboard, caught squarely between the intense interests of competing superpowers. Decades of political turbulence, economic inequality, and constant foreign interference ultimately led to the country exploding in the historic Islamic Revolution of 1979. The ancient monarchy fell, the Shah was exiled, and Iran transformed into a strict theocratic republic, completely severing its political ties with the Western world. And today, because of that history, we witness a truly stunning historical paradox. In the mind of the modern individual, Two completely different states seem to exist simultaneously within the exact same borders. The word Iran immediately triggers in most people stark images of modern geopolitical tension, harsh economic sanctions, international conflicts, and grim evening news reports. Meanwhile, the word Persia, ironically, has not disappeared from our vocabulary at all. Instead, it has acquired a romantic, almost mythical aura in the global subconscious. Persia is instantly associated with lost grandeur, refined poetry, exquisite art, flying carpets, and fairy tale empires of old. Two distinct names, one single piece of rugged land, and a constant, relentless struggle over exactly how this civilization will be remembered by history. Over its staggering 5,000-year history. This profound culture developed the ultimate psychological mechanism for survival. When clashing with the Macedonians, the Arabs, or the unstoppable Mongols, they didn't fight to the death and disappear. They quietly absorbed their conquerors, patiently reshaping them from within to fit their own ancient mold. They stood at the absolute origins of human civilization and literally invented the linear time within which we still live our daily lives. But perhaps their greatest, most difficult battle is taking place right now. Because sometimes, hidden deep behind the simple name of a country on a map is a quiet, invisible, and eternal war. A war between who a people were in the grand grandeur of the past, who they are forced to be today, and how the outside world wants to see them. If you want to keep exploring the deep, hidden histories of the world's most resilient civilizations, make sure to hit that like button right now. Drop a comment with your thoughts on this incredible survival story and subscribe to the channel so you never miss our next deep dive into the echoes of history. Asterisk. Chapter 10. The hidden silk and the shadow merchants while emperors were busy bleeding on the battlefields. A completely different kind of conquest was taking place along the dusty tracks of the plateau. Iran sat squarely in the middle of the Silk Road, the ultimate economic superhighway of the ancient world. But playing the devil's advocate for a moment, being stuck in the middle of a global trade route isn't just a blessing. It's a massive, glowing target on your back. It meant that every merchant, every spy, and every roaming army had to pass through your front yard. To survive this constant traffic, the Iranians didn't just build roads. They invented an entire infrastructure of hospitality and economic control. They constructed a massive network of caravanserais, fortified stone roadside inns, spaced exactly one day's travel apart. Step inside one of these ancient structures, and you would find a bustling, multilingual microcity protected by high walls and armed guards. Here, Chinese silk merchants, Indian spice traders, and European buyers mingled under the watchful eye of Persian officials. Now, you might think the Persians just sat back and collected taxes, but their real genius lay in how they dominated the trade itself. They became the ultimate middlemen of antiquity. If a Roman nobleman wanted luxury silk from China, he couldn't just ride east and buy it. The Persians tightly controlled the transit routes, effectively setting the prices and deciding who got access to the goods. They turned economic geography into a lethal diplomatic weapon. Even when the Central Empire collapsed under various invasions, this commercial heartbeat never stopped. The local merchants simply adapted, changing the currency they accepted but keeping the trade flowing. They realized very early on that physical borders change, but the global demand for luxury never dies. By controlling the flow of wealth and information between East and West, the people of the plateau ensured that even when they were politically dominated, they remained economically indispensable to the rest of the world. Chapter 11. The Empire of the Mind and the Scientific Golden Age. The Arab conquest dismantled the political machinery of Sassanid Iran. The Western world assumed that Persian culture would simply dissolve into the wider Islamic empire. But that is a fundamental misunderstanding of how this civilization operates. They didn't fight the new faith. Instead, they completely hijacked its intellectual framework, sparking what history now calls the Islamic Golden Age. Take a close look at the intellectual giants of this era, and you'll find a striking pattern. The men whose books laid the foundation for modern Western science and philosophy weren't from the deserts of Arabia. They were pure products of the Iranian plateau. Think of a man like Ibn Sina, known to the Western world as Avi, working in the vibrant libraries of Bukhara and Hamadan. He wrote the Canon of Medicine, an incredibly dense, systematic encyclopedia that became the standard medical textbook in European universities for over 500 years. He didn't just practice medicine, he pioneered the concept of clinical trials in quarantine. Then look at Al-Khwarizmi, a brilliant mathematician from Qur'an. He took Indian numbering systems, refined them, and wrote the definitive book on balancing mathematical equations. His very name gave us the modern word algorithm, and the title of his master, Kitab al-Jabbar, is where we get the word algebra. Without his work, the digital world you live in today literally could not exist. These scholars didn't just translate ancient Greek and Roman texts, they actively corrected them, added rigorous experimental proof, and created entirely new fields of study. They turned the cities of the plateau Isfahan, Ray, and Nishapur into global beacons of learning while Europe was still stumbling through the Dark Ages. By shifting their focus from military dominance to absolute intellectual supremacy, the Iranians built an empire of the mind that no invading army could ever burn down. Chapter 12. The Architecture of Paradise. You want to see the exact point where Iranian spirituality, math, and artistic genius collide. You only have to look up at the ceilings of their historic mosques and palaces. The concept of a walled, beautiful Gardena stark, deliberate contrast to the harsh, unforgiving desert outside is a uniquely Persian invention. In fact, the very word paradise comes directly from the old Persian word parid, meaning a walled enclosure. Iranian architects didn't just build structures, they attempted to recreate the cosmic order of the universe using bricks, mortar, and brilliant turquoise tiles. They perfected the art of the Iwana Massive, vaulted hall walled on three sides with one end entirely open to a courtyard. This architectural signature created a profound sense of transition, drawing a person from the blinding heat of the street into a cool, shadowed space of absolute reflection. But their true engineering masterpiece was the development of the often called stalactite vaulting. This is a complex, geometric subdivision of a vault into scores of tiny, interlocking plaster cells. When sunlight filters through the high windows of a dome lined with the light fractures into thousands of shifting patterns, making the solid stone roof look completely weightless, as if it were a shimmering, divine illusion. They coated these complex surfaces in a deep, vibrant cobalt and turquoise glaze that seemed to change color depending on the time of day, reflecting the sky back to the earth. This wasn't done just for visual appeal. It was an active expression of their ancient worldview. By mastering geometry and the physics of light, they forced the viewer to look away from the grim realities of political turmoil and gaze directly into a physical representation of eternal harmony. Chapter 13. The verse that saved a language to dare is a famous saying on the plateau that while the Arabs conquered with the sword, the Persians conquered with the pen. Following the fall of the Sassanid, the Arabic language became the language of religion, law, and status across the Middle East. The ancient Persian language, Farsi, was facing a very real, existential threat of extinction. It was on the verge of becoming a dead dialect, used only by peasants in remote mountain villages. Then, a single man spent 30 grueling years writing a single book that changed the course of history forever. His name was Ferdowsi. Around the turn of the 11th century, he completed the Shahnameh, or the Book of Kings, a massive, epic poem consisting of over 50,000 rhyming couplets that chronicles the mythical and historical past of Great Persia, from the creation of the world down to the Arab conquest. Now, here is the real kicker. Ferdowsi deliberately chose to write this colossal work using almost pure Persian words, actively rejecting the Arabic loanwords that were flooding the high society of his day. He packed the pages with sweeping tales of legendary heroes like Rustam, tragic battles, and deep philosophical musings on the fleeting nature of political power. The Shahnameh did something miraculous. It gave the fragmented, occupied people of the plateau a unified memory of who they were before the flags changed. It kept the old vocabulary alive in the hearts, minds, and mouths of the population. To this very day, an ordinary person walking the streets of Tehran or Shiraz can read and perfectly understand Ferdowsi's millennium-old verses by preserving their mother tongue through pure, unadulterated poetry. Ferdowsi ensured that the soul of the civilization remained completely intact, even when its borders were drawn by foreign rulers. Chapter 14. The Shadow of the Safavids and the Great Divide. For hundreds of years after the fall of the ancient empires, the Iranian plateau was a shifting patchwork of local dynasties, Mongol rulers, and Turkish warlords. But in the year 1501, a teenage warrior named Ismail marched into the city of Tabriz and declared himself Shah. He founded the Safavid dynasty, and with a single, sweeping decree, he made Shia Islam the official state religion of his new empire. Let's look at this move critically. Before the Safavids, the vast majority of the population on the plateau was actually Sunni, just like most of the rest of the Islamic world. Ismail's decision wasn't just a sudden spiritual awakening. It was an incredibly sharp, calculated geopolitical maneuver designed to solve a desperate problem. To the west sat the massive, rapidly expanding Ottoman Empire, a Sunni superpower that looked at the Iranian plateau as its next logical conquest. By forcibly converting his realm to Shah Ismail drew a thick, permanent cultural and religious red line between his people and the Ottomans. He created a distinct, fiercely independent national identity that bound the various Turkish, Persian, and nomadic tribes of the plateau to a single, shared destiny. This move triggered centuries of brutal, high-stakes warfare with the West, turning the borderlands into a permanent war zone. But it worked. It gave Iran a rigid, internal cohesion that made it completely unabsorbable by its neighbors. The Safahan turned their capital east into one of the most beautiful and culturally vibrant cities on earth, proudly showing the world that they were a completely distinct, sophisticated civilization that bowed to absolutely no one. Chapter 15. The paradox of the modern phoenixes. We step into the harsh light of the modern era, The long-term consequences of this 5,000-year game of survival become blindingly clear. The radical pivot of the 1979 Islamic Revolution didn't just alter the country's political structure, it set up a profound, living paradox that continues to baffle outside observers to this day. If you look at the nation through the lens of modern international news, you see a state locked in a permanent, high-stakes standoff with the Western world, enduring waves of crippling economic sanctions and navigating a web of regional conflicts. But if you step past the political headlines and look at the actual society, you find a population that is deeply conscious of its ancient, pre-Islamic roots. The modern citizen of this land celebrates Nowruz, the traditional Zoroastrian New Year, with the exact same passion as their ancestors did 3,000 years ago. They still gather around the poetry of Hafez to look for guidance in times of trouble, and they hold on to an intense, quiet pride in the fact that their language and culture survived every single apocalypse history could throw at them. This is the ultimate secret of the Iranian plateau. It doesn't break under pressure, it simply hardens from within. It is a civilization that mastered the art of playing the long game, using its cultural depth as an invisible shield against the chaotic storms of global politics. They have spent 5 millennia losing battles only to win eternity, proving that while empires, regimes, and names may rise and fall like dust on the wind, the core soul of this ancient land remains absolutely unbroken. If this deep dive into the hidden machinery of human history opened your eyes, make sure to show some love by hitting that like button, leaving a comment with your perspective on this epic survival story, and subscribing to the channel so you're right here with us for the next chapter of the world's greatest stories. And that brings us to the ultimate, mind-bending truth of this entire 5,000-year epic. When you look at a map today and read the word Iran, or when you open a history book and get lost in the romance of Persia, you aren't just looking at a country. You are looking at a living, breathing laboratory of human survival. Think about the sheer impossibility of it all. The world's most terrifying conquerors, from Alexander the Great to the bloodthirsty hordes of Genghis Khan, marched onto this plateau, certain they could bury this civilization in the dust. They brought fire, they brought swords, and they brought towers of skulls. But they didn't realize they weren't just fighting an army. They were fighting an idea, a culture so deep, so rich, and so completely hypnotic that it literally reprogrammed the very tyrants who tried to destroy it. The invaders won the battles, yes, but the plateau won eternity. So, the next time you hear this nation mentioned on the news, look past the political headlines, the harsh sanctions, and the modern geopolitical chess games. Remember that beneath the surface of the modern world lies a civilization that literally taught humanity how to measure time. A culture that turned poetry into a shield against extinction. And a people who mastered the art of losing the physical world just to keep their immortal soul completely intact. Empires rise and fall like waves crashing against a cliff, but the cliff remains. And this ancient land, it is still standing, watching the empires of today slowly turn into the dust of tomorrow. If this journey through the shadows of time shook your understanding of history, don't just walk away. Smash that like button right now. Drop a comment below sharing which chapter blew your mind the most, and hit subscribe with notifications turned on. You won't want to miss our next deep dive into the hidden machinery of the world's greatest stories. Until next time, keep looking beneath the surface. Thanks for watching. If you liked it, please like, comment, and subscribe. I'll see you in the next video. Bye!